I'm gonna cut through the chase on this. I could never get to him. I tried all I could, and I could never get to him because I was barred away from him by securities and all that type of thing. I could not get to him.
They cut you off?
That's right, Larry. They cut me off.
Was Joe Jackson a monster or a man who deserves our sympathy? He stole Michael Jackson's childhood, left deep scars of pain and trauma that haunted the king of pop for his entire life. Yet with one iron fist, the same father single-handedly turned his son into the greatest entertainer the world has ever seen, the undisputed king of pop. So where does the truth lie? Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're diving deep into the dark files of one of the most controversial fathers in music history. He was the man who brought the Jackson 5 to the world. But for Michael, Joe Jackson was pure terror. Belts cracking across young skin, electrical cords, tree branches, being slammed into walls. Michael once said he thought he wouldn't survive the beatings. Today, we're opening the full investigation, shocking details through every stage of Michael's life. The moments that will bring tears to your eyes, from the rundown streets of Gary, Indiana, all the way to the fantasy world of Neverland. And what exactly happened when little Michael would start vomiting, just from seeing his own father walk through the door? The fear was so overwhelming that his body physically rebelled. We'll reveal the heartbreaking truth behind that trauma. If you're ready for the raw, uncensored story, hit that like button right now, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the truth behind the legends. Let's begin. Part 1. Gary, Indiana. The Belt in the Darkroom. Now let's step back into the shadows of Michael Jackson's childhood and find the painful answers. Picture a small, run-down house on Jackson Street in Gary, Indiana, back in the late 1960s. The air smelled of steel mills and struggle. This is where Joseph Walter Jackson ruled with an iron fist. Born in 1928 in Arkansas, Joe grew up poor in the Jim Crow South. His own dreams of becoming a professional boxer were shattered by responsibility. He worked brutal shifts as a crane operator at Inland Steel, married Catherine, and raised 9 children in a cramped 2-bedroom home. Determined that his family would escape poverty, Joe saw music as the only ticket out. He formed the Jackson 5 with little Michael, just 5 or 6 years old, as the sparkling centerpiece. But the price of that dream was terrifying. Every afternoon after school, the rehearsals started. 4, 5, sometimes 6 exhausting hours with no breaks. No playing outside, no friends, no childhood. Joe sat like a king in the middle of the living room, belt across his lap, eyes locked on every move. One missed note, one wrong dance step, and hell broke loose. Michael later revealed in his heartbreaking 1993 Oprah interview, he would sit in a chair with a belt in his hand.
Well, you don't get to do things that other children get to do. You know, the simple things that they so much take for granted. Having friends and slumber parties and buddies and just hanging out. There was none of that for me. I didn't have any friends when I was little. My brothers were my...
The belt cracked across their young skin. Sometimes he used a heavy buckle. Other times, electrical cords from the kettle or thin tree branches that he made the boys break themselves before the punishment. There were painful accounts that Joe forced the boys to strip down and rub oil on their bodies so the lashes would sting even sharper and leave deeper marks. Catherine would scream and bang on furniture, desperately begging, "Joe, you're gonna kill them." But Joe believed fear was the only way to build greatness. Little Michael suffered the worst. At just 6 or 7 years old, his small body drenched in sweat, voice trembling as he tried to hit those perfect high notes. One mistake and the belt flew. Joe once slammed him into the wall so hard the impact left him gasping in pain, and the emotional cruelty ran even deeper. Joe constantly mocked Michael, calling him Big Nose in front of his brothers. Those words cut deeper than any whip. They planted a lifelong insecurity that would drive Michael to countless plastic surgeries and that nervous habit of touching his nose. The fear was so intense that Michael's own body rebelled against him. Just hearing his father's car pull up or seeing Joe walk through the front door, the little boy would start shaking uncontrollably. His stomach would twist violently, and he would vomit, physically sick from pure terror. As Michael himself described it years later, "There's been times when he'd come to see me and I would get sick. I'd start to regurgitate." Imagine that. A child so terrified of his own father that his body could not handle the man's presence. After those brutal sessions, Michael would often curl up alone in a corner, crying quietly. No toys, no laughter, no friends to share his pain with. The next morning, he had to paste on that bright, angelic smile and perform like nothing had happened. Joe wasn't doing this out of pure hatred. In his mind, he was a protector, pulling his black family out of the steel town ghetto in an unforgiving world. He gave them discipline when society offered them nothing. But in doing so, he stole Michael's innocence and replaced it with fear, pain, and impossible pressure. That little boy who should have been running freely in the streets, playing games, and dreaming sweet dreams, instead learned that love always came with suffering, and perfection was the only way to survive. Those dark nights in the belt room of that Gary house would shape the rest of Michael Jackson's life. His loneliness, his longing for Neverland, and his endless search for the childhood that was taken from him so cruelly. From the smoke-filled steel mills of Gary, Indiana, the Jackson 5 would soon rise to Motown stardom. But the terror of Joe's belt followed them every step of the way. But even as the bright lights of fame began to shine on the Jackson 5, the shadow of Joe Jackson's discipline never faded. In fact, it only grew darker. Part 2 script, Motown and Child Superstar Era, Exploitation and Isolation. From the smoke-filled steel mills of Gary, Indiana, the Jackson 5 rose like a rocket. In 1969, they signed with Motown Records. By 1970, they were unstoppable. I Want You Back hit #1 in January 1970. ABC followed in March, then The Love You Save and I'll Be There, 4 consecutive #1 singles, a record at the time. The world fell in love with these talented black boys from the ghetto. But behind the glittering Motown machine and screaming fans, the terror didn't stop. It only evolved. Joe Jackson wasn't just their father anymore. He became their full-time manager, their controller, their drill sergeant. He kept an iron grip on every aspect of their lives. Constant rehearsals, endless tours, no room for a normal childhood. While other kids their age were playing ball or riding bikes, Michael and his brothers lived on planes, in hotel rooms, and on stages across America and beyond. In the fall of 1970, the Jackson 5 launched their first major national tour. They played massive venues like Madison Square Garden in New York and the Los Angeles Forum. By 1971 and 1972, the schedule became relentless. City after city, show after show. In 1972, they added a European tour. Private tutors traveled with them because there was simply no time for regular school. Joe made sure of that. He sat in the wings or backstage with that same intensity from the Gary living room. One small mistake during a performance, a slightly off note, a missed dance step, and the punishment came later. The belt, the harsh words, the exhaustion that never seemed to end. Michael was just 11 or 12 years old, carrying the weight of the group on his tiny shoulders as the lead singer and main attraction. One of the most heartbreaking details came from Michael himself. Even as the world cheered, he felt completely alone. After the bright lights dimmed and the fans went home, Michael would slip away backstage and cry by himself. The same boy who lit up the stage with that million-dollar smile, spinning and singing with pure joy for the audience, would break down in tears the moment he was out of sight. The loneliness ate at him. He had brothers, fame, money, but no real friends, no freedom, no childhood. And then there was the emotional distance with his father. Michael and all the Jackson children were forbidden from calling him Daddy. Joe insisted they call him Joseph, cold, formal, businesslike. As Michael later shared in interviews, he desperately wanted that father-son bond, that warm daddy, but it was never allowed. It created a wall between them that never fully came down. Jermaine Jackson, in his memoir, You Are Not Alone, Michael Through a Brother's Eyes, explained their father's mindset. Joe had seen the dangers of Gary's streets, the gangs, the violence, the dead-end lives. He was determined to keep his sons far away from that world. In his mind, the strict discipline and fear were necessary tools to protect and elevate the family. But the methods remained extreme. Fear was still the main fuel. Rehearsals ran for hours, even on tour days. The boys were pushed to physical and emotional exhaustion. Joe's control turned the joyful music into a pressure cooker. On stage in 1970 to 1972, Michael was a supernova, a child prodigy dazzling millions. Off stage, the big nose taunts continued. The pressure to be perfect never let up. Joe transformed his gifted son into a money-making machine for the family. There were no hugs after a great show, no gentle praise, just the next rehearsal, the next flight, the next demand for perfection. And like that, young Michael, at 12 years old, standing in the wings after another sold-out concert, the roar of the crowd still echoing. His body exhausted from performing and traveling, his heart heavy. He wipes away the tears quickly before anyone sees, pastes on that famous smile again. Because the show and Joe's rules must go on. No time for weakness, no time for being a child. Joe's drive delivered results. The Jackson 5 became Motown's biggest sensation since the Supremes. They pulled the entire family out of poverty. They achieved what seemed impossible for a black family from Gary in that era. But the cost was Michael's soul. The little boy who once dreamed in that small Indiana house now lived in a golden cage of fame, isolated, emotionally starved, and still terrified of disappointing Joseph. The success was real. The world celebrated. But inside, Michael was already beginning to fracture the loneliness, the longing for normalcy, the search for the childhood he never had. Those Motown years didn't heal the wounds from Gary. They only covered them with sequins and spotlights. Part 3, Solo Career in Teenage Years, Psychological Control and Lasting Scars. The spotlight grew blinding. The money poured in like a flood, but the nightmare never ended. As Michael Jackson stepped out of the Jackson 5 shadow and launched his solo empire in the late 1970s, Joe Jackson refused to release his iron grip. He stayed in the driver's seat as manager, demanding, criticizing, and controlling every move. What should have been Michael's triumphant escape became another prison. In 1979, Off the Wall exploded onto the scene. Michael was no longer just a cute kid from the group. He was a dazzling solo artist. But behind closed doors, Joe pushed harder than ever. Endless meetings, brutal scheduled demands, and the same cold expectation of perfection. Michael, now a teenager trying to find his own identity, felt suffocated. The boy who once feared the belt now feared the man himself with every fiber of his being. The terror ran so deep that even a single glance from Joe could destroy Michael. Years later on Oprah in 1993, he laid it bare with a trembling voice. Just a look would scare you. I'd start to regurgitate. Think about that. A grown man, one of the most famous people on earth, physically vomiting at the mere sight of his own father. The trauma had wired itself into his nervous system. One cold stare and his body betrayed him, reliving the Gary hell all over again. But the pain wasn't just old memories. Joe's personal betrayals ripped fresh wounds across the entire family. For decades, Joe carried on a blatant, long-term affair with Cheryl Terrell. In 1974, that secret relationship gave birth to Giovanni Jackson, Michael's half-sister. Catherine knew. The humiliation burned. She filed for divorce in 1973 and again in 1982, unable to bear the public shame and constant lies. Both times she pulled back, but the damage was done. The Jackson home became a battlefield of arguments, tears, and broken trust. Michael watched it all. The man who preached family discipline and control was tearing that same family apart with his infidelity. The confrontation in 1980 was especially ugly. Catherine and some of the children faced one of the women involved, the tension exploding into raw confrontation. While Joe lived his double life, Michael carried the emotional weight. He started avoiding his father at all costs. He would cancel plans, hide in his room, or make excuses just to stay out of the same space. Joseph was no longer just a formal name. It became a symbol of everything cold and painful in Michael's life. No warmth, no daddy, only business, pressure, and disappointment. Those nights in his luxurious Encino mansion told the real story. Picture it, Michael, barely out of his teens, lying in a multi-million-dollar bedroom surrounded by gold records and awards. Outside, the world worshipped him as the rising king of pop. Inside, he was still that frightened little boy. He would toss and turn, hearing the phantom crack of the belt echoing in his head. Nightmares flooded in, Joe's angry face screaming, the sting of the buckle on his skin, the mocking laughter calling him Big Nose. He woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, sometimes physically ill. Even in his dreams, he couldn't escape. The scars ran deeper than anyone knew. The childhood taunts about his nose had planted a poison that grew wildly during these years. Michael became obsessed with his appearance, undergoing multiple plastic surgeries to chase an ideal of perfection that Joe had brutally drilled into him. His self-image was shattered. He struggled to form real relationships. Trust felt impossible. Friends stayed at a distance. Romance was complicated and rare. Isolation became his only safe place. He began retreating into his own world, building walls no one could climb. By 1982, Thriller shattered every record. Over 70 million copies sold. Michael was untouchable, the biggest star on the planet. He moonwalked into history, changed music videos forever, and redefined what a black artist could achieve. Joe stood on the sidelines, proud of the empire he helped create. But for Michael, every triumph tasted bittersweet. There were no genuine father-son hugs, no proud, well-done son, just more demands, more business talks, more reminders that he was never quite enough. The psychological control had done its damage. Michael carried the weight of a stolen childhood, a fractured family, and a father who saw him more as an investment than a son. The boy who once vomited from fear still lived inside the superstar. Every flash of fame, every screaming fan, every award only highlighted how empty he felt inside. He was a prisoner of the past, running faster and faster, but never able to outrun Joe's shadow. The success was undeniable. The pain was unbearable. And those invisible scars from the late 1970s and 1980s would follow Michael into every chapter that came after, shaping his loneliness, his obsessions, in his desperate search for the love he never received from the man who was supposed to protect him. Part 4, Later Years, Forgiveness and Legacy, 1990s to 2009. The Scars That Never Fully Healed. Time passed, the world kept spinning. Michael Jackson became a father himself, and everything changed. By the early 2000s, Michael had 3 children of his own. Holding them in his arms, watching their innocent eyes, something deep inside him cracked open. The cycle of fear and pain that Joe had created. Michael refused to let it continue. He vowed never to raise his hand to his own kids. No belts, no terror, only love, protection, and the childhood he himself had been robbed of. He wanted to give them everything he never received. In the 2003 documentary Living with Michael Jackson, Michael sat down and delivered one of the most powerful statements of his life. With a quiet, almost peaceful voice, he said, "I totally forgave him." He had made peace. He understood that, in his own twisted way, Joe had tried to build something bigger than all of them. Fatherhood had softened Michael's heart. He no longer carried the burning rage of the little boy from Gary. He chose forgiveness. But forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. Even in those later years, the wounds remained raw. Michael still spoke with pain about one simple thing. He didn't allow us to call him Daddy. That cold demand to call him Joseph instead, it symbolized everything missing in their relationship. No warmth, no tenderness, just authority and distance. That single detail haunted Michael until the end. Joe, for his part, never fully accepted responsibility. In a 2003 BBC interview with Louis Theroux, he defended his actions with steel in his voice. "I whipped him with a switch and a belt. I never beat him. You beat someone with a stick." He drew a sharp line between whipping and beating, as if words could erase the terror his children had lived through. Catherine stood by her husband in a 2010 Oprah interview saying, "You might as well admit it. That's the way Black people raised their children back then." He used a strap. She framed it as cultural discipline, a product of their time and harsh reality in Gary. LaToya Jackson went even further in her explosive 1991 memoir, accusing Joe of extreme physical and emotional abuse across the family. She later partially retracted some statements, claiming coercion by her then-husband Jack Gordon. But the cracks in the family story had already spread wide. And here lies the final devastating shock. Despite all the fame, the billions of records sold, the moonwalk that changed pop culture forever, Michael Jackson carried the damage of Joe's methods until his dying day in 2009. The endless plastic surgeries, rooted in the cruel big-nosed taunts that destroyed his self-image as a child. The creation of Neverland Ranch, that sprawling fantasy playground filled with rides, animals, and lost boys. A desperate attempt to reclaim the childhood Joe had stolen from him. The paranoia, the isolation, the difficulty trusting people, the fear of the outside world. All of it traced straight back to the fear Joe had drilled into his soul with every crack of the belt. Michael built an empire that made his father's wildest dreams look small, but inside, he remained that frightened boy who vomited at the sight of Joseph. He forgave, yes. He even reached out in love toward the end, but the scars ran too deep to disappear completely. The man who gave the world so much joy lived with a broken heart. Joe Jackson built a dynasty. He pulled a poor Black family out of the steel mills and into global superstardom. His discipline created legends, but in the process, he crossed a terrible line. What began as tough love became systematic abuse, physical, emotional, and psychological. The success was undeniable. The human cost was heartbreaking. The lesson echoes louder than any hit record. Discipline can push children toward greatness, but abuse destroys the very soul it claims to strengthen. No amount of fame, money, or tough upbringing excuses taking a child's innocence, safety, and peace of mind. You cannot break a child in the name of a brighter future and expect them to emerge whole. Michael Jackson forgave his father. The world watched a superstar who chose grace over bitterness. But the tragedy remains. A father who helped create the king of pop, and a son who spent his entire life trying to heal from the man who wore the crown first. Part 5, the final chapter, A Fragile Peace and Eternal Scars, 1990s to 2009. The lights of the world grew harsher. The fame that once lifted Michael Jackson to impossible heights now pressed down on him like a crushing weight. By the late 1990s and into the 2000s, the king of pop lived in a gilded cage of his own making, surrounded by bodyguards, lawyers, and suspicion. And through it all, the ghost of Joe Jackson lingered, a complicated shadow that Michael could neither fully escape nor completely reject. After becoming a father himself, Prince in 1997, Paris in 1998, and Blanket Biggie in 2002, Michael experienced a profound shift. Holding his own children, he saw the innocence he had lost. He swore to break the cycle. No fear, no belts, only the love and protection he had desperately craved as a boy. Fatherhood softened something deep inside him. It allowed him to look back at Joe, not just with pain, but with a measure of understanding. In the 2003 documentary, Living with Michael Jackson, Michael spoke with surprising calm. "I totally forgave him." He acknowledged that Joe's harshness came from a brutal upbringing in the Jim Crow South, the Great Depression, and the steel mills of Gary. He even called his father a genius, in some respects, for pushing the family to greatness. In private recordings with Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, that later became the book, The Michael Jackson Tapes, Michael reflected, "I have begun to see that even my father's harshness was a kind of love, an imperfect love. In the place of anger, I have found absolution, and in the place of revenge, I have found reconciliation." Yet forgiveness did not erase the scars. Michael admitted the wound was still there. He struggled to see Joe as the changed man he claimed to be in his later years. He is so different now. Time and age has changed him, and he sees his grandchildren, and he wants to be a better father. It is almost like the ship has sailed its course. The scar is still there. The physical distance grew. By the mid-2000s, Michael and Joe had limited contact. Bodyguards and entourage kept Joe at arm's length, a pattern that had started years earlier. Michael avoided deep conversations. The old fear never fully disappeared. Even as he tried to heal the psychological damage from childhood, the big-nosed taunts, the belt, the emotional coldness, fueled his paranoia, his isolation at Neverland, and his desperate attempts to create a fantasy world for himself and his children. Then came the unthinkable. In June 2009, Michael Jackson died at age 50 from a fatal combination of drugs, primarily propofol administered by his doctor. The world mourned, but for the Jackson family, the tragedy carried layers of unresolved pain. In the days before his death, according to accounts from those close to him and later statements by Joe, Michael reportedly tried to reach out. He asked for his father. "Call my father. He would know how to get me out of this." Joe later said with deep regret that he was available but was never contacted in time. The saddest part, Joe told CNN years afterward, was knowing his son had reached for him in his final moments. The same father he had both feared and needed. But perhaps the most heartbreaking moment of all came in the immediate aftermath of Michael's death. Just days after losing his son, while the world was still in stunned mourning, while millions wept and candles burned in Michael's honor, Joe Jackson stepped in front of the cameras. Not to speak of his grief, not to share memories of the little boy he once raised in Gary. Instead, he began promoting a new record label venture. With a steady voice, he referred to Michael as the biggest superstar in the world, then quickly pivoted to business opportunities and future projects tied to his son's legacy. The image was devastating. Here was a father who had just buried his most famous child, yet he seemed unable to show raw sorrow. No broken tears, no trembling voice filled with regret, just the same cold, calculating businessman the family had known for decades. Many were horrified. They saw it as the ultimate confirmation of who Joe had always been, a man who viewed his children first and foremost as investments, as tools to build an empire. Even in death, Michael appeared to be another asset to be managed. The pain cut deep for those who loved Michael. While Paris, Prince, and the rest of the family grieved privately, Joe's public appearance felt like salt rubbed into an already open wound. It was as if the man who had shaped Michael's entire life, with belts, fear, and unrelenting pressure, could not stop seeing him as the king of pop long enough to simply mourn him as his son. Some tried to defend him. They said this was Joe's only way of coping, the hardened steel mill survivor from Arkansas, the man who had endured poverty, racism, and broken dreams, never taught how to express vulnerability or tenderness. Business was a language he knew. Ambition was his armor. But for millions watching, it felt like the final cruel twist in their tragic story. Even in death, Joe Jackson could not give Michael the one thing he had craved his entire life: the simple, unconditional love of a father. Michael did not include Joe in his will. The estate went to his mother, Catherine, his 3 children, and charitable causes. Joe was left out, a final silent statement from a son who had forgiven but could not forget. In the years that followed, Joe spoke of missing Michael deeply. In interviews, he expressed regret over the distance fame and security had created between them. He acknowledged trying to reach his son, but being blocked. Yet he also defended his methods until the end, maintaining that the discipline was necessary for success. Even after forgiving his father, the king of pop died carrying the invisible chains of his childhood. Neverland was his attempt to reclaim what Joe had taken. The surgeries, the isolation, the childlike wonder mixed with deep paranoia, all of it traced back to the man who both built him and broke him. Joe Jackson lived until 2018. He outlived his most famous son by 9 years, forever known as the patriarch who created a dynasty but paid an enormous human price. Michael had forgiven him, but the world, and Michael's own life story, would never let the complicated truth disappear. A father who gave his son the world. A son who spent his life trying to survive what that gift cost him. In the end, neither fame nor forgiveness could fully heal what began in that small house in Gary, Indiana. As we come to the end of this painful journey, one truth stands above everything else. Joe Jackson built an empire. He pushed his children to unimaginable heights. But in the end, the most tragic figure in this entire story was still Michael Jackson. A little boy who just wanted to be loved by his father. A genius who gave the world so much joy, yet carried unbearable pain and loneliness until his final breath. A son who forgave, but could never fully heal. So tell me in the comments, do you think Joe Jackson was a monster, a hero, or a deeply flawed man who truly believed he was doing the right thing? Was the price of Michael's success too high? Could their relationship have been different? Drop your honest thoughts below. I read every single comment. If this story touched you, moved you, or opened your eyes, please hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the hidden truths behind the legends. More shocking and emotional stories about the Jackson family, Hollywood tragedies, and untold stories are coming very soon. Thank you for watching. Remember, behind every legend is a human heart that once was just a child.